Good morning and welcome to day 2 of Politico's Sustainable Future Week Summit, which will focus on mobility and energy. If you're looking for the actual subject, fueling cleaner transport, what does the future look like for EU mobility? My name is Jan Chański and I'm Politico's Senior Policy Editor. This morning we'll be talking about cars, planes, fuel and emissions. The unifying theme is the pressure to cut CO2 emissions from transport. Under the EU's Green Deal, the bloc has promised to cut those by 90% by 2050. Doing so involves a huge technological leap, and it also means massive economic disruption. We're now seeing that in the car sector. The EV transition is happening more slowly than expected. Chinese car companies are storming into Europe with cheaper and often better products. And as a result, thousands of people are losing their jobs. The political effects are being felt across Europe, from the rightward shift in this year's European Parliament election to the impact on Germany's upcoming federal election. There's also growing blowback over the EU's 2035 phase-out of CO2-emitting cars and pressure to see if there can be some wiggle room on allowing sustainable fuels to be part of the solution on that. Aviation also faces disruption as calls to increase taxes grow, and the EU mandates a shift to sustainable aviation fuels. We'll be looking at all of those issues in a series of panels this morning. But first, I'd like to thank our partners for making this event possible. Our leading partners are Amazon, BMW Group, Coca-Cola Europe, Corteva, AgriScience, GE Aerospace, Moeve, and the Polish Electricity Association. Our presenting partners are ADM, EDF, Geopost, GE, Vernova, IRU, McCain, and Yara. Our networking partner is A2A, and our visibility partner, ZOE Institute for Future Fit Economics. I'd like to start with a few housekeeping rules. We're really keen on debate, so please do share your thoughts with us on X, or if you have particular issues with Elon Musk, you can use any social media that you prefer, and you can use our hashtag Politico Sustainable Future Week. We hope to hear from you. Some sessions do include Q&A for our audience here in the room, and those sessions are indicated on our program, and the moderators will let you know when there is the option to have a Q&A. You can ask questions, so just raise your hand and you'll be handed a microphone. As a general rule, we ask you to keep your questions short and snappy, and please do avoid long statements instead of questions. And if you can also indicate who you are and which organization you represent. You can ask questions by raising your hand during the dedicated Q&A moment. And now I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Jordan Dahl. She's a mobility reporter who covers the car industry for us, and she'll moderate the session, Insights from the European Parliament. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Sustainable Future Week. I'm Jordan Dahl. I'm a mobility reporter here at Politico. And we're here today to talk about the last legislative term. It was dominated by the Green Deal, decarbonizing industries. But now, with economies slowing across the bloc, an automotive sector in crisis, and competitors knocking on the door, the conversation has shifted from decarbonization to competition and how our industries can compete in this environment. And with that comes a review of the previous legislation and questioning whether it serves current interests. What are the new priorities and what might be on the chopping block? We're going to be getting into all of that and more today. For those who are with us in person, you will be able to ask questions after. So please do keep in mind and start writing down what you might like to ask our panelists. And without further ado, let me introduce who they are. We have Sophia Kircher MEP. She's the vice chair of the TRAN committee, and Virginijus Sinkevičius who is our distinguished vice chair of the TRAN committee and a former commissioner. Thank you both for joining us. And I believe we have one... Anna, there you are. Last but certainly not least, Anna Vasconcelos from Portugal. She is a substitute on the TRAN committee.
Yes.
Thank you all three for joining us. So, a couple of quick fire questions to get us all warmed up. What grade would you give the last term? So over here with Sophia.
So B minus.
B minus, okay. Solidly middling. Anna?
B.
For commission or for parliament?
Oh, let's go for commission for you.
For commission, I can't do that. I think Politico did an excellent job. Fair evaluation, which I'm particularly happy and proud with. But honestly, I think it was a challenging term. My mic is not working. Thank you very much. I think it was extremely challenging term, which at the beginning of term, if someone would give a white sheet of paper to write down how we imagine, and I guess all 27 commissioners, including Ursula von der Leyen, would write how we imagine term, we would be probably completely wrong with the crisis that we have dealt. I think what was important that Commission was there every time when it was needed. It was reactive, it was proactive.
I'm not hearing a grade.
So I think, no, I cannot give anything less than A, so.
Hey. Should we call up your former boss, see what she has to say about that?
Can we comment on our evaluations?
Well, let's move on to the legislation itself. What would you say was the most impactful legislation that should remain in place from the last term?
I mean, the Green Deal had lots of impacts, and especially the ban of the combustion engine had a big effect on the automotive sector. So that's something that we should keep in mind.
Okay, so we have a positive. Anna?
In terms of impact, I agree, the Green Deal, but I would like to emphasize also the emissions trading system, which I think is a good example of the direction in which to go, because it applies market-based logic to addressing environmental issues in a way that compatibilizes our economic priorities with environmental concerns.
Well, so obviously Green Deal, but and then the rest of the legislation, it was really coming from the Green Deal and aiming at the targets of Green Deal. But I would say that the biggest, as regards the impact, is Fit for 55 plan itself, because I remember very well when we announced that Green Deal and EU is going to be a fully decarbonized by 2050. There were not so many countries around the world who have done similar announcement. By now, this club has grown and we have really a large number of countries there, but nobody else has a real plan of how to do it. What are the actions needed by 2030 to reach the, first of all, minus 55% target. So I would say Fit for 55 is one of the biggest ones and having the largest impact.
We'll get into emission targets a little bit later, but I noticed that no one here would volunteer a single European sky as the best legislation, and certainly the industry would agree. There are still a lot of problems, they say, with air traffic control issues, and that more is needed to be done, but progress, of course, has been really difficult to be had. What comes next for a single European sky? Sophia, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I mean, we just had a vote on a single European sky 2 months ago in the plenary, and I think it's very important that the single European sky comes into effect and that we connect the sky, and I think it's also very important that we have a look on the decarbonization also in the sky sector.
Industry would certainly agree. The question is, how?
Yeah, it's very difficult. I mean, there are lots of debates going on which fuels you could use, and I think it's very important that we foster innovation and that we find a solution on this as well.
Anna, Sustainable fuels have been a really big issue for aviation. The whole bloc has been focusing on decarbonizing, reducing emissions, but emissions are still growing in the aviation sector. How can or should legislation play a role in solving that problem?
Well, liberals in general are very adamant about technological neutrality. So our goal here is to set the priorities and allow the market to generate the solutions to address them. And I think the aviation sector is going in that direction. There is, in terms of fuels, there is still, the technology is not yet there. And it is important that as we legislate, that we create the conditions for companies, the market, the research and innovation to come up with those solutions. Again, at the end of the day, decarbonizing, the transport sector is one of the big polluters, the big contributors to carbon emissions. And we know that a big part of the solution is rail, and we can get into that later. Aviation is certainly a part of the challenge to address, and a big part of our role really is to not get in the way of them coming up with the solutions in terms of energy for this mode of transportation.
Virginijus, what do you make of that?
I think it was well answered, and first of all, until alternatives does not exist, people will fly. I'm coming, from Lithuania, where we sort of always advertised ourselves as being the center of Europe, but in reality, you are center of Europe if you're driving a truck. Otherwise, you can reach Lithuania only by plane, because car is just too long, and train, it's even worse. So until there is no alternative, people will choose flying. Maybe some going by car. Second, of course, innovation. Here, I think extremely important are investments. But if you innovate with expectations that you will have result, that might also not happen. That's how science works. You cannot just order and then get the desired results. And thirdly is of course, we need to see what could be best practices, how certain fuels could be saved, because we know that with certain bureaucratic rules that we have, it also doesn't help to save fuel for the aviation sector. And here overall, I think the upcoming mandate of Commission will be driven very much by Draghi's report, where he tells a thing that we all kind of know very well, that deepening single market in many spheres is the only way for the EU possible forward, possible to compete, and I think transport is one of those sectors too.
Across parties, we've seen a lot of calls now for increased in funding. That is a tall order with a slowing economy. There's only so much hiding in the couch cushions. So where should this funding be prioritized? And how do you propose finding those funds? And I want to start with you.
With me. Well, I think that, first of all, the question is very well put, because at the end of the day, if we don't tackle the problem of economic competitiveness, funding will always be an issue. I think that we need to think of funding in terms of, on the one hand, what is feasible from a budget point of view, but also how we can encourage private investment and how can we create conditions for private investment. In terms of priorities, I think in terms of transport, again, the main priority has to be rail. Especially when it comes to making it more attractive for consumers, and there's a lot that we can do as legislators to streamline legislation across member states. One of the big problems we have is fragmentation, especially for this mode of transport. I would love to speak more about the challenges of rail, but funding is not, public funding is not enough to invest what is necessary to reach that ambitious aim for Europe in this mandate. So we need to make rail more attractive for private investment. It's very hard because it's a very long-term return of investment. So yes, there's something that we can also do, and I think there are already there's some progress in making it more attractive for private investors, and we need to keep making that more of a reality for investors.
Virginijus, you seem eager to say something.
No, I'd say that top priority should be defense, because consequently Russia's invasion of Ukraine and how that war is going to end, consequently it's going to have the biggest impact on the EU. So defense should be the top priority, and that also goes hand in hand with transport, because we know military mobility is at the end of the day 99.9% and hopefully 100% is used by civilians. The source of money could be again going into the markets and borrowing those money. Smart would be, of course, to invest those money here domestically in the EU. I think defense industry has a lot of potential to create jobs, create innovation. We see example of Israel where a lot of spin-offs in innovation, which were at the beginning created as military ones, then has become something that we use every day. So there are lots of potential in that. Secondly, probably if we want to maintain support to Ukraine, we need to find a source that would not be the taxpayers' money. Here I would tax the companies that still continue their operations in Russia, because they're funding the Russian war chest, so they have to be taxed. Probably overall, speaking about the EU's budget and EU use of investment, Enrico's Letta's report is very well written, and there you can see that our pension funds, unfortunately, are not investing in the EU, and this is a potential, huge cash back for a new commission that they need to unlock, ensuring that those funds, they are not going abroad over the ocean, but they actually stay here and are invested here. So this is the three sources that I see. And the top priority, I would say defense, but then a lot can be created out of that.
Rail and defense, I can hear the automotive people in the room crying already. For Sophia, Virginijus makes a good point of we have war on the doorstep, sectors that are really struggling to compete in global markets. How do you propose threading that needle?
I mean, we are facing lots of challenges. My colleague just mentioned the war, but we also have to be more competitive again. So I think it's very important to invest in innovation and that we make Europe competitive again. I mean, we've lost somehow our innovative leadership, and we were always known to be very innovative. And so I think that's one very important part, that we have public and private funding for this. And I mean, it's a very important topic for me that we boost also the rail transport and that we boost the shift from the modal shift. And I think it's very important that we focus also on this topic and to connect Europe better.
So your party, the EPP, is quite determined to repeal the 2035 legislation on emissions for vehicles and introducing synthetic fuels, biofuels, other kind of fuel sources into the mix. Critics would say that that will actually make Europeans' car sector less competitive in the global market. In the US, you have a lot of investments in EVs. China, of course, is leading the way. So how do you propose making Europe's automotive sector more competitive in that space? And in terms of the actual legislation itself, what exactly is it that the EPP wants?
Yeah, I mean, the automotive sector is struggling a lot. We are hearing every day that some manufacturers are closing. and we have to make sure if we want to reduce the CO2 emission that we do not completely ruin our economy. So I think both of those things have to go hand in hand, and we have to boost the innovation. We have to have an open approach to be technological neutral. I think that's very important that we keep this neutrality. And I mean, Ursula von der Leyen stated last week in her speech in the parliament that she wants to focus also on the automotive sector, that she wants to boost innovation, and I think that innovation is the key.
Anna, any thoughts?
Yes, actually, I would like to just clarify. I thought that the previous question was about funding within mobility sector. But in any case, I do think that a lot of, I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of the challenges that we need to tackle come down to investing in infrastructure. And I think energy in particular is also an important focus to tackle the defense challenge. And again, that all comes back to innovation as well. As for the auto sector, I think it is, I mean, it is one of the sectors that is struggling. And by the way, investing in rail is not necessarily diminishing of or devaluing at that sector. I think everything is very compatible. But yes, I think again, in terms of moving in the direction of electric vehicles, investing in the electric grid, prioritizing interconnections between countries, and making sure that investments in that direction lead us in the direction of a profitable sector. The transition is very complicated, and I do think that we as legislators again need to be attentive and try to ease the transition as much as possible. Yeah.
Virginijus?
Well, I think what's extremely important is what we see from the European automotive sector is, of course, they really need a demand, especially when we talk about the EVs. And here, if you follow the hearings of the Commission, we were really squeezing the new commissioner into the corner as regards the corporate fleet, because we see it as a low-hanging fruit. And of course, it has to prioritize European manufacturers, because, for example, the BMW group that sponsors this event, they probably know everything about my driving habits, because EV is just a different type of driving. And of course, having Chinese, for example, vehicles, EVs collect a lot of data about everything, about infrastructure, driving habits, and etc. And we don't know where that data is going to be transferred and how it's going to be used. So, of course, we also have to look at it, that electricity energy sector with digitalization, transport sector with digitalization, it also brings serious cybersecurity risks that needs to be avoided. But we see as a potential that is not being used is corporate fleets that could be easily electrified, and demand for the European manufacturers could be created there. Usually this is the vehicles that don't have range anxiety, and I think more or less have a infrastructure. On top of that, I agree, if I would say, two priorities, the second priority would be energy security for us, because I think the situation in which we are now was a wrong base that we have built our competitiveness on. Expecting that, putting the industries competitive on the Russian gas needle was very naive. And we see that now we are paying the price. So, of course, our energy independence is key, also to be fixed from a variety of sources, but of course it has to be domestically produced as much as possible. And then, of course, if we want an increased demand for EVs, for example, other types of vehicles. I've seen the hydrogen there, one standing. Infrastructure has to be created, and countries, they have funds. RRF, cohesion funds. They very much give an opportunities for the member states to invest into a better infrastructure.
Sophia, I want to go back to you.
May I just add something?
Sure.
I mean, you just said that independence is like the key. And I'm just wondering, because if we get only dependent on electric vehicles, we get more dependent on China. And we do not have the infrastructure right now to charge the cars. And I mean, we get more and more dependent.
We don't need to get dependent on China in EVs. You always have a choice, and you can choose vehicle which you want to buy. Renault is producing EVs, BMW is producing EVs, Mercedes is producing EVs. So you always have a choice. So it's not necessarily you getting dependent more and more on China. And I think with China, the first steps of unfair competition was done. And we further need to go ahead with it, also looking from the security angle. This is what I emphasized a lot, that EVs uptake a lot of data of your driving habits, of your city's infrastructure, and etc. So therefore, there is also serious security implications. But what with EVs as a solution now that we have, first of all, it's clean vehicles. It's not only about CO2 emissions, but it's also about cleaning the air, decreasing the air pollution in our cities. Maybe there will be other solutions like hydrogen, which I know that the large vehicles industry is very much looking into that potential. The most important is, of course, to make sure that those innovations they become affordable for business, and especially, for example, large vehicles, truck industry, I'm pretty sure they will uptake it very quickly, because for them, at the end of the day, it's a business case. It's a complete different case, let's say, from the passengers' cars. But for the large trucks companies, they will just count a business case. And if their Excel will show that it's more profitable to drive a clean car, very quickly they will invest into a clean cars.
Do you have a comment?
I mean, I just think that China is now leading the market and that we have to be more innovative, and otherwise people will just buy Chinese cars as long as they are cheaper than the European ones. So I think we don't have the real solution yet.
Wouldn't the EPP argue that the solution is alternative fuels and maintaining the combustion engine prowess of years past?
I mean, I think it's very important that we keep the technological neutrality, and that we focus on different engines that are there, and that we also focus on different fuels, that we boost the innovation, and maybe there will be an innovation in 2 or 3 years that we are not aware of. So I think it's very important to keep going, keep supporting innovators, and then I'm pretty sure that we will have a better economy, that we will boost competitiveness again. But I think we should not just ban one thing and not think about all the alternatives.
So the actual legislation itself, though, it allows for any kind of fuel source so long as it is zero emission at the tailpipe. So what exactly is it that the EPP wants? When it says technological neutrality, we need e-fuels, biofuels, technically those can be used so long as it's zero emission. So what exactly is it that the EPP is calling for?
I mean, what we really want is to reduce the CO2 emission. That's the main goal, and I think that unites all of us sitting here, but the approach is a different one. We want to support the innovation and find solutions.
I want to move on to rail, which keeps getting mentioned here and there. So there are issues connecting major cities across the bloc. There are problems when it comes to pricing, availability for consumers. How do you propose tackling that issue and finding more ways for people to take more sustainable transit? And Anna, I want to go to you.
I'll start by saying I'm Portuguese, and it's easier to fly from Lisbon to Madrid than it is to go by train, because you don't have a direct connection by train. And this is a 21st century. We're prioritizing environmental targets, and we don't have an interconnected Europe via rail. I think it's a mode of transport that would be naturally preferable for consumers, and somehow it's not, and we need to understand why. I think, again, in part the reason is it's in the past it was a mode of transport that was prioritized, and it was neglected, not really updated with the times. And now tackling the challenge of updating it will require a lot of investment. And it's not an easy mode of transport to invest in, as I said previously. That's one of the challenges. There are other challenges that arrive from the fact that we have 27 different jurisdictions with different legislation that needs to be streamlined and harmonized. We're big advocates for deepening the single market and addressing this issue without any compromise on sovereignty. It doesn't have to do with that. You can defend nations' interests and find ways of, again, streamlining, eliminating unnecessary bottlenecks that makes everyone's lives more difficult. So I think the challenges with rail very much are based on that, streamlining legislation, or I should say the solution is in that direction. Again, making it more attractive for private investment, investing in digitalization. And I think, the priorities in that regard for this commissioner, the new incoming commissioner, are well set in that regard. I think the political will is there. I think everyone recognizes that in order to make transport cleaner, a big bet on rail has to be made, and that doesn't need to undermine other modes of transport because they're all reconcilable. But yes, we do need to interconnect. This is a very small continent and very densely populated, so there is a huge opportunity here to address this challenge.
Virginijus, do you agree? Is the political willpower there?
It's there, and I think it's there for a while. Unfortunately, investments and projects are not there, and that's what's lacking. But honestly, I believe that first of all, a better use of intermodal is a solution that has to be integrated into supply chains, because it also we see from our road infrastructure that it's just it just takes so much resources to renew, and building additional lanes does not help. You still have traffic, and then of course it's a growing issue, and we see from even countries like Germany, who probably could always say that they have the best infrastructure, that now probably that's not the case, and it needs significant investments to renew it. While investment into rail infrastructure can offload significantly the roads as well. Secondly, of course, better connection. People, they might be driven by Green Deal goals, but most likely they will be driven by what's comfortable for them, what's more affordable for them. And if there is no reliable connection from Lisbon to Madrid, people will choose a flight, obviously. So of course, until there is no connection, it's very difficult to even offer something. But on top of that, we have to take into account that if you look at passengers carriers on rail, this is extremely unprofitable business. And that's another case where we need to probably strengthen the cargo case for them, so that they could balance it out a bit. Otherwise, of course, that will require significant subsidies in order for companies to survive carrying the passengers.
So how does one go about motivating cargo companies to build such lines, create the infrastructure? Is it through subsidies, or is it parallel with passenger trains and subsidizing them, or finding innovations? What's the solution?
I think, look, for business, it's much easier than for passengers, because business, in most of the cases, because they have their financial departments and so on, they will do a rational choice of just calculating and what's the most profitable, what would be quickest, what would be cheapest, and etc. So for business, you can create, let's say, a framework where they would be inclined to choose, let's say, much more rail than road, if they would see that it's safer for their products, that it may be cheaper, and that it gets them from A to B quicker. So the value proposition for business is much more easier. For passengers is a bit different, because it's not A to B. Sometimes, people need to get to a different point where demand might be not there. So for business, I think intermodal connection, improving of the intermodal and legislating it right and having infrastructure in cases is much easier to be done than for the passengers.
Great. Well, we have
Yeah.
time for a few. I'm sorry.
May I add something on
Yes.
the rail infrastructure?
Sure.
Yeah, so I think it's very important that we invest in the infrastructure and that we also reduce the fragmentation. And I think it also has to be affordable and convenient for people to take the train. And we have to boost also the shift from the road to the railway, because right now, for instance, if there is a train passing from Munich to Verona, it has to stop for 30 minutes at the border just to make sure that you test the brakes, that the train driver changes, because they have to speak the language of the country. So it's just not attractive, so for passengers, but also not for goods, to take the train. So I think that's something that we really have to work on.
Thanks for that. We have time for a few questions. Hopefully some of you have some juicy ones. I see, it's the gentleman over here on the far right. And please
hello?
identify who you are.
Is this on? Hello?
Can we
you
get
hear
his
me?
mic on?
Hello? Okay, perfect.
There we go.
Well, thanks a lot for this panel. My name's Philip Freeman. I'm from the European Transport Workers Federation. We've been talking a lot about, sustainability of mobility, sustainability of transport, but there hasn't been anything about the social sustainability of the sector. As I'm sure you know, there's enormous labour shortages throughout Europe in transport. 500,000 truck drivers missing, 150,000 urban bus drivers missing, and that's just the data we have. 30 years ago, these jobs were high quality, attractive, prestigious, and now our members all across Europe are telling us, no, people don't want to do these jobs anymore. There's low wages, overwork, poor working conditions, and an epidemic of third-party violence. Passengers simply attacking workers. So Commissioner Tzitzikostas, during his hearing, underlined that transport workers were our greatest asset. So will you commit to promoting quality jobs in this mandate? So things like banning wet leasing in aviation, enforcing the mobility package, because this isn't just a question about jobs, it's also a question about environmental sustainability. The road to rail modal shift is undermined by the fact that labour standards are not enforced in road. It's an unfair subsidy. So that's...
Thank you for your question. Anna, do you want to address that?
Well, I can address the topic. I didn't get the precise question. But I do, I think that's a great concern that you raised about labor shortages. I would add, actually, that it's also a very difficult job. It's an increasingly difficult job, just the amount of bureaucracy that needs to be dealt with sorry, missing the word, to do their job, to go across from point A to B. A lot of documentation is needed and a lot of understanding of how to process that documentation and from different countries and so on, especially crossing borders, is required. Anyway, this just to highlight the complexity of the job, and which is growing. I think, again, this comes into a wider context of transformation in work that we're about to undergo, or already undergoing, but about it is about to be intensified with artificial intelligence and so on. So a lot of investment in new skills is vital, but also I think rethinking how our education system works, how it integrates with, I mean, we still have a mentality where we have this three-part life in which we study, we work, and then we retire. And I think all of that needs to be rethought in a wider, scope of challenges that we're facing right now.
Thank you.
But again, I think investment in skills and digitization is a big part of the answer.
We'll make sure we have time for other questions. We have a woman here in the center in a gray jacket, I think. Sorry, I can't see.
Good morning. Thank you very much for this great discussion here. My name is Barbara Hoffmann. I'm from the European Respiratory Society. We represent healthcare professionals and patients with lung disease across Europe. And of course, transport and traffic is a big issue for us, as it emits a lot of air pollutants and also greenhouse gases, fueling climate change, which is also a big health issue. Now, what we've heard was a lot about talk about innovation and modal shift and new fuels, which is, of course, all important. I was wondering, what are the thoughts of the Commission and the Parliament here, on reducing the need for this kind of hugely increased transport that we've seen in the last 20 to 30 years, specifically the individualized traffic? What can be done to reduce the need?
I'd like to
well, thank you very much for your question. I think, first of all, it's again about the possibilities for people to take public transport, and within the cities, we see that possibility exists, and it's much easier and affordable. Sometimes it's even subsidized by your work. While if you're living in outskirts, that's a bit of more difficult. But even then, the solutions exist, like the ones where you can leave your car and take a metro at the stop or a bus, and etc. So I think it's very much about the cities implementation, but also cities planning, the way our cities are planned. Because when I go to United States or United Arab Emirates, I see this architecture of cheap oil, how the cities are planned, where you can move from A to B only by car. Europe is different. We are much more tight in our cities planning, and of course it can offer a possibilities. What's extremely important here is the investments of the cities into the public transport. For me, it's still very difficult to understand those cities who buy biogas, diesel-driven buses, while here the EV buses exist. There is no range anxiety. They can be easily charged, and that would mean a clean transport and new buses for citizens and the motivating one. So I think it's very much depends on, first of all, cities' policies, and unfortunately, the most choking ones and where the highest number of diseases caused by the pollution is our largest capitals across Europe.
I believe I saw someone here on the left. Yes, this gentleman here in the center.
Good morning, Daniel Kamiński from the Volkswagen Group. I tend to agree with Mr. Sinkevičius, who said that the customers normally they are driven by these choices that are for them convenient, and I would add also less costly. So, what could actually the European Parliament and policymakers do to make the production of EVs less costly? Here in the EU, I know we have homework to do, but probably the policymakers have also some homework to do. So I would be very interested in hearing some concrete proposals, what can be done. Thank you.
Virginijus and then Sophia, please.
I'll answer shortly. The production is your business, and I'm not gonna get there because that a lot depends on supply chains and what you offer. But probably what can be done is, of course, when you purchase the vehicle, you should not only calculate the first price that you pay, but then your costs when you're using it. And what can be done is, of course, cheaper electricity, better infrastructure, where by buying an EV, of course, I know that it will be cheaper to maintain. But what's extremely important is, of course, when we talk about, for example, EVs, is of course the speed of charging it, the battery, the range, and the operating system. It's a bit of a revolution of the car industry, where here, of course, again, we probably come back to investment into innovation, where the collaboration among the European automotive must be the one driving the technologies around the globe, and really not even, competing with the Chinese ones.
Sophia, you have the last word.
I might just add the point bureaucracy. It was very increased during the Green Deal, and it led to the fact that many companies had to fill in all those reports, and this also had some extra costs. So it might be also a solution to reduce the bureaucracy.
All right, thank you very much to our panelists. A lot was discussed and a lot more to get into the next 5 years. We'll be watching carefully. For the attendees in the room, we ask that you please remain seated. In a few minutes, there's going to be a branded segment led and organized by GE Aerospace. Riccardo Procacci, President and CEO for Propulsion at GE Aerospace. Afterwards, you are stuck with me for another panel, this time on emission targets and keeping them alive, and if that is mission impossible. We'll be getting into that and more later on. Thank you very much.